faster we recover, the faster we can get back to training, or the faster we can get back to training hard. A few days ago, I posted a video which was about what I consumed directly post-training to optimize recovery. Today, I hope to cover a bit more of the science and the rationale behind what I had. So I'm just out walking the dog at the minute. When I get back, I'm going to sit down and give more of an informative kind of spiel on the whys and the hows. We are ready to get cracking. So there are two main elements that I'd like you to consider when it comes to post-exercise diet for recovery. Replenish glycogen stores. This main key element is essentially only going to be done by eating carbohydrates post-exercise. Number two is to increase muscle protein synthesis. So this is about replenishing what we have utilized during that session. Depending on what the main intensity is within that session and main type of session, you will use a different proportion of glycogen. But regardless, we do utilize glycogen in the session. And one of the main key elements to prioritizing recovery is to get that carbohydrates, get that circulating glycogen back in the system as quickly as possible. The quicker that you get that carbohydrate in the system, the quicker you'll be able to recover. It's simple as possible as that. The second key element to this is basically all to do with our protein. So this is about ensuring that the damage that we have done to our bodies is then accounted for. So during exercise, we inflict certain damage on our muscles, we strip certain muscle fibers, and we're effectively breaking down muscle. This is about giving ourselves amino acids through proteins to build those muscles back up and prevent muscle protein breakdown. Now, I remember back when I was a kid, when I was like 16 years old, and coming across one little feature, said something like, make sure you have your post-workout protein shake within 20 minutes of finishing your workout, otherwise you lose out on all of the gains associated with that session. I ordered as many protein supplements as I possibly could and made sure that I had a protein shake immediately after getting back from a ride. Now we know that the importance of that protein directly post-workout is somewhat insignificant compared to a lot of other factors. So going back to these two main points then. So one of the most important things you need to do is you need to replace your glycogen stores. As I say, during intense exercise and during any exercise whatsoever, we use a certain ratio of carbohydrates to fuel that workout. If it's low intensity riding, it will be predominantly utilizing fat as a fuel source, but we don't need to replenish that post-exercise. What we do need to be replenishing is any of the carbohydrate stores, any of the circulating glycogen stores that has been utilized in that workout. The higher intensity that workout, the more of a demand there is to replenish this as soon as we possibly can. What we need to consider is that a lot of this replenishing of glycogen will happen from the total daily calories that we consume in that day. However, what we need to consider is that the ingestion of carbohydrates in the first 2 hours after exercise allows a much faster rate of glycogen resynthesis. And that is through a couple of certain muscle signaling, glycogen signaling pathways which occur during exercise. To name two, one of them is mTORC1. And this is basically just a nutrient signaling pathway which is stimulated by glucose and insulin. This is upregulated directly post-workout and basically means that any carbohydrates that we take on can be utilized a lot more efficiently. We've also got certain glucose transporters. GLUT4 is stimulated directly post-workout. So directly post-workout, there is a much bigger demand for carbohydrates. The most important finding of this study is that the failure to consume carbohydrates in the immediate phase post-exercise recovery leads to very low rates of glycogen restoration until feeding occurs. So yeah, effectively, without that feed of carbohydrates directly post-workout, just relying on like circulating muscle glycogen, circulating liver glycogen that you may have had from your breakfast that day is not sufficient enough. Now, the second point which I want to talk about is the need for increasing muscle protein synthesis directly post-workout. First things first, I would definitely recommend taking on protein post-workout. However, what I do want to talk about is a hierarchy of importance when it comes to protein. And this is a very, very misunderstood concept which a lot of people are getting wrong. At the top, the most important aspect when it comes to protein is your total amount of daily protein. So how many grams of protein you are having in the day. Most people are not having enough. Most people are, what I see is people having about 0.7 to 1 grams of protein per day. What the literature suggests is to have between 1.6 and 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for me, as an example, which is an 80 kilogram rider, that would mean I would have about 160 grams of protein per day. So how are you going to solve this total daily protein? It's difficult without certain protein supplementation. So if you have a shake, a protein shake mid-afternoon with a 30 gram serving in there, then that's quite quickly going to bump up your protein target without massively influencing your total daily calories. Take my day today, for example. This morning I had 4 eggs, totaling about 24 grams of protein. Mid-morning I will have a protein shake, which will be another 20 grams. For lunch I will have some fish, can of mackerel. I get a fairly big can of mackerel, which is another 25 grams of protein. Mid-afternoon, post-workout, I will have another protein shake with certain carbohydrates in there as well, and that is another 20 grams of protein. For tea, I will have what we're having tonight. We're having turkey bolognese, and again, I've already worked out the macronutrients for that. That's got about 30 to 35 grams of protein in it. And then my evening snack, right before I go to bed, I have a tub of cottage cheese with some fruits and nuts in it, which typically has about 20 grams of protein in it. I have had 140 grams of protein. So I have ticked off my 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And when I talk about this hierarchy of needs, a classic example is take somebody who gets up in the morning, they don't have a feed of protein in the morning, they might just have plain porridge oats with some berries in. Then they go for a ride for 2 or 3 hours, they get back at 12 o'clock and they think, oh Christ, I need to have a protein shake immediately post-workout to get the benefits of this protein inside me. Well, that's all well and good, and to be honest, yes, you do need to do that. But to best optimize that day, you should have had a protein serving earlier on in that day. So you should have mixed some whey protein in with your porridge oats, for example, to stimulate muscle protein synthesis before you go out on the ride. Alternatively, you could have had a protein bar while out on the bike. Now, for most people, especially if you've been out on a few-hour ride, you won't have ingested protein for a couple of hours before that post-workout feed anyway. So yes, there is a need to have that post-workout feed of protein. However, it is not the case of I need to have that as soon as physically possible, otherwise I am going to ruin all my gains. Because it massively depends on when your last feed was. But you need to consider this hierarchy of needs when it comes to protein in general. Total daily protein is definitely most important. Then consider the timing and spacing those feeds out throughout the entirety of the day, so into 5 or 6 meals in a day. Then the next thing to consider is having this protein directly post-workout. While I'm on with that though, there is science to suggest that ingesting protein with carbohydrates dramatically increases the rate of glycogen resynthesis. So when it comes to shunting glycogen back in the muscles as soon as you possibly can, it is favourable to have protein with carbohydrates, comparatively to just carbohydrates on its own. So what should this post-workout meal include and what should it limit? Well, it should include some fast digesting carbohydrates and some fast digesting proteins. In terms of ratios of these, I would try and stick to a minimum of 40 grams of carbohydrates and 20 grams of protein. So that is obviously a 2-to-1 ratio. Now in the literature, it does often talk about a 3-to-1 ratio, so therefore 60 grams of carbohydrates with 20 grams of protein. The reason I always say 20 grams of protein is 20 grams is typically a good amount to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So once you have derived what that value is, then you can work to this value. You can have up to 40 grams of protein without any of that extra protein going to waste. So consider that if you are a bigger individual, if you are 80, 90, 100 kilograms and above, then you may want to work towards the upper limit of that protein target and then match the carbohydrate target appropriately. But one of the main aspects to all of this, which again is at the top of the tree when it comes to recovery in general, your daily calories. If you are depriving yourself of calories, you will be compromising your recovery massively. The things it should be limiting is things which are going to be slowing the rate of digestion and therefore slowing the rate of recovery. So the things which will be doing that are things like high fibrous food, insoluble fibers. So I talked a little bit about my video about the fact that I don't have many fruits and vegetables directly post-workout. It's going to slow the rate of digestion and therefore slow the rate in which you can get those much needed elements of the nutrition into where it needs to be. The other thing that you need to limit is fat. Too much fat in your meal has been shown in the studies to slow the that insulin spike. Basically, it slows the absorption of those carbohydrates into the bloodstream. So limit the amount of fat. When you get back from a ride, it is not the time to be having a really big greasy steak for your protein, for example. Okay, we are going to cut the video there. So if you have any further questions, anything that I haven't covered in this video that you want to discuss or you want to know, please drop it in the comments section below or send me a message and I will hopefully answer your question as full as I possibly can. The next video that I will be doing is a Q&A video. I will be answering any questions you have on training, nutrition, cycling, coaching, my day, my athletes, all confidential, and things like that. So please drop them in the comment section below. Alternatively, if you want it private, then please private message me through any of my social media channels and I will answer them in the next video. I will see you in a week or so time. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to my channel. See you later.